Right. Gratitude seems to be, the theme of the day. You heard from Paul and from Ellen about the new BIDMC initiative, Grateful Nation. Our national dialogue over the course of the campaign and now the new president's administration has expanded to include consideration of gratitude as well as of change. Standing here this morning, it's easy for me, and I'm sure for many of you, to feel quite overwhelmed by feelings of thanksgiving. Here we are, again, sitting, standing, being close to each other, and celebrating another year of life. Those of you who have heard me speak before know that I most often begin with a poem, and usually by my favorite poet, Mary Oliver. And today that was cinched when I discovered she had a poem titled Gratitude. I'm going to give you a condensed version, but I recommend that you try to find and read the whole thing. Gratitude by Mary Oliver. What did you notice? The dew snail, the low-flying sparrow, the bat on the wind in the dark, big-chested geese in the V of sleekest performance. What did you hear? The thrush greeting the morning, the little bluebirds in their hot box, the salty talk of the wren, and the deep cup of the hour of silence. What did you admire? The oaks letting down their dark and hairy fruit, the carrot rising in its elongated waist, the onion sheet after sheet curled inward. What astonished you? The swallows making their dip and turn over the water. What would you like to see again? And this is the part that I couldn't abbreviate. My dog. Her energy and exuberance, her willingness, her language beyond all nimbleness of tongue, her recklessness, her loyalty, her sweetness, her sturdy legs, her curled black lip, her snap. What was most tender? The tall blank banks of sand, the clam clamping down. What was most wonderful? The sea and its wide shoulders. What did you think was happening? The green breast of the hummingbird, the eye of the pond, the wet face of the lily, the upswing, the downpour, the frayed silence of the first snow. So the gods shake us from our sleep. So for all of us, what did you notice? What did you hear? What did you admire and what astonished you? What would you like to see again? What was most tender? What was most wonderful? And what did you think was happening? I'm sure we all have answers to those questions. In the few minutes I'm going to use this morning, I will try to weave what I imagine are our common gratitudes into a sacred blanket to shelter us all. In noticing and in hearing and in admiring day to day to day, we attend to our souls. We learn to stand outside in the darkness and open our eyes and our hearts to the heavens above us. We are part of a much grander scheme. We have learned it must be very dark before the stars appear. And we remind ourselves that we have so loved those stars that we need not fear the night. It is a cliche that we must appreciate, that you can only appreciate the good times when we've had some bad ones. We have learned that's true. We would not be here today with our hearts so full and our arms open to one another if we had not similarly walked in dark forests. We have all been forced to learn while walking down rain-drenched paths that we must occasionally look heavenward and see in the arching branches a cathedral. Even remembering that while we note that splendor, we have to also continue to be alert for roots and ready to brush the raindrops off our noses. What did you notice? I noticed the many small kindnesses that are daily miracles in our treatment area. I have seen you stop to lay your hand on the shoulder of a stranger who was clearly suffering. I have seen you share your special foods brought from home, and more importantly, your stories with each other. I have witnessed the extraordinary friendships that develop between two people who sit next to each other week after week, arms stretched out, receiving chemotherapy. What did you hear? I heard the staff member from transport who told me that each time she comes to the inpatient oncology floor to take a patient there to an x-ray or to a scan somewhere else in the hospital, she pauses for a moment outside the door to that unit and says a prayer for all who were there. I heard the pathologist who told me that each time she prepares a slide that is going to give or not give a cancer diagnosis, she pauses for a moment before she puts her eye to the lens and softly says, "Please help me get this right." I heard the young woman say to a friend, "Please hope for me." And I heard a remarkable young woman dying from cancer who sent a last message to her family. "Please tell them I am not afraid." What did you admire? I admired the young mother who, traveling with her family on the New Jersey Turnpike, stopped for lunch at a rest area. While eating, she saw another family enter the restaurant and noticed that that mother was bald. My patient thought, well, if she can do that, I ought to be able to do it too. And she took off her wig. And looking around that crummy restaurant, 5 minutes later, she saw 2 other women who had done the same thing. I admire our volunteers, all cancer survivors themselves, who come week after week to our unit to lighten the burden for others who are traveling the same route they once did. What astonished you? I was astonished a few years ago when a woman who came to my group for women with metastatic cancer transitioned to hospice care. Because she lived alone, the hospice first refused to become responsible, insisting that there needed to be a primary caregiver in the home. Her sisters in the group, all of them watching her last days and recognizing that they were looking at some point at their own future, became her primary caregivers, making a schedule and ensuring that one of them was always with her and she was never home alone. What was most tender? The affection, dare I call it love, that sometimes grows between a patient and his or her medical caregivers. You know what that feels like, many of you. I have seen the respect, the gratitude, and yes, the love that can flow between 2 brave people who understand that we are all pilgrims in this world together. And of course, I have seen the tender love that develops among us. Cheryl, a young mother who came to one of my groups, died last week. Her sisters in that group have surrounded her, her family, and maybe most important, each other with sweet, tender, and protective love. What was most wonderful? The ways that you share your lives with me and with each other, the good and the true bonds that we develop, the incredible relationships that we nurture, cherish, and treasure for every day of our lives. And finally, what did you think was happening? I think we were all learning how to live. This diagnosis, which none of us wanted, brings us a chance to change. It brings us a luminous perspective, a chance to pay attention, to learn how to be idle and to learn how to feel blessed. It asks us what we plan to do with our one wild and precious life. It permits us to loosen the yoke of unnecessary burdens or worries and wrap ourselves instead in a joyful, grateful cloak of many colors. I hope that your cloak, woven of all the experiences of your life, shelters and embraces you. I pray that each of us, together this morning under this tent, surrounded by blessings, carried forward by love, will learn to live as lions of courage and does of grace. Jane Kenyon wrote, "Let it come as it will, and don't be afraid. God does not leave us comfortless, so let evening come." And remember always, we stand together in that evening. When it is over, when it is all over, I want to say all my life I was a bride married to amazement. All my life I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. L'chaim, to life, in every way choose life, and thank you for celebrating with us this morning.